Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome to day 32. And since there are not 32 days in a month, welcome to month number 2. Quick note before I start today's shirt. I've been forgetting about that. We're back to Has Been Hotels, Season 2 spoiler shirt. More on that later. But skipping over getting through the t-shirt, that is, today did not actually start with singing. Today started with structure. I spent a good portion of the morning reorganizing how I'm working because I realized the system I had been using really only worked when I had two pieces in play. Bass piece in the morning when my voice was low, higher piece in the afternoon when my voice was high. At this point, that's no longer the case. I'm starting to expand what I'm working on. And the old approach, morning piece, afternoon piece, just alternating, which was focus for the day, it wasn't going to scale. So instead of trying to force that to hold, I stepped back and rebuilt how I organize a day in the week. I tried not to make it too complicated, but I did want to do it in a way that could actually handle pieces, multiple pieces, different types of work, and different energy levels or experiential levels without everything starting to collide with each other. And I put the design together last night and this morning. Started using it today, and it was the first full test. The first thing up under that new structure was Boulevard, letting it run in the morning, which meant the morning voice and F4s. So this morning's Boulevard was the first primary run under the new system, and it ended up doing two things at once. It was both a test of this new structure and really a step forward in the actual vocal work. So we started today with take 88, and that really functioned as a true calibration pass under the setup. The efficiency pathway that's been coming from the coach's new resonance work, it was still there, which is good, but it's not fully stabilized. That hurt. But it's not fully stabilized yet. And that showed up very clearly. The sound itself is better. There's more color, there's less push, and things are starting to feel more open. But the trade-off right now is control. The pitch starts to waver a little. The timing gets a little inconsistent, and the peak notes are harder to manage cleanly. My ever-famous new Section 4 especially had a very specific feeling. And the best way I can describe this is Bruce Banner trying to hold back a transformation from the Hulk. You can feel the stronger, more controlled version of the sound trying to exist, but the instability is still right there underneath it trying to break through. And it's not regression. The system is reorganizing around all of this new formation and technique. Had my calibration take, on to take 89. Things really started to begin coming together there. The new coordination held more consistently, especially through sections 2 and 3. Section 2, which has been a bit of a transitional weak point, actually started to feel more like it was reaching a foundation point. Instead of it just being something I would sail through, I start focusing, foundation. Section 3 showed that the tone I'm going for can now sit there without clipping or needing any extra force to hold it. Section 4 finally showed something really important. The energy from Section 3 didn't spill over and overdrive Section 4. And that's what's been going on. This is the first real sign that the dynamic control across the sections is starting to improve. Now, there are still gaps. Breath at the end needs work, and more importantly, the emotional connection is not fully there yet. So the nature of that gap has changed. At this point, emotional connection isn't about pushing harder, adding more intensity. It's about aligning the intention with the phrasing so that the performance feels internally motivated instead of technically executed. Now, the notes are getting there. The sound is getting there. The why behind each phrase is now still catching up. And that's the next layer. Just as important as the takes themselves was this morning a decision to stop. By the end of take 89, 2 takes, there were some pretty clear indicators. My mouth was running dry, I was hungry, and I had really been going for quite some time doing organization setup and then running. And pushing for another take was probably going to turn into overcorrection rather than improvement. So I decided to stop there. So the work was kept clean and it stayed aligned with the whole point of the system. Progress without burning the system down in the process. Overall, strong session, good first test of this new structure I'm using, and a clear shift from access to stabilization. Once that structure was in place, it really opened the door to expanding what I'm working on. I knew it was time to continue more of Boulevard. 1 and 2 are getting really tied down. 3 and 4 are beginning to fall into place. This is about the time I look forward. But what came next looked really kind of tricky. And as I started jotting down the ideas for this, I realized pretty quickly that what I was writing wasn't just notes. It was turning into something that needed its own track entry with its own work time and separation from everything else. So I gave myself about 30 minutes to sit down and figure out what the actual activity was going to be. That's about when it became clear I hadn't just walked in to learn the next section of the song. I walked into a construction problem. As a reminder, the Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day, arranged by the Bass Gang. This is a 4-part bass arrangement. This section is tight, synchronized. All 4 voices come in together on the first word. There's no stagger. There's no offset. Everything lives on the same rhythmic grid. And the only thing separating the parts is the tone and character of each singer's voice. It's certainly not the timing. So the first thing I had to do and establish was, where do I set an anchor to start setting this mess up? And fortunately, and picking away at this thing for a while, the 4 separate melodies, one of them is the original verse melody. And that has to drive phrasing and alignment, or the whole thing just drifts off into who knows where. So from there, I started mapping how the section actually behaves. it begins in this very controlled, slightly elevated, almost robotic delivery. Then, toward the end, it transitions to something more aggressive. But, and this is the catch, it never loses the synchronization. It stays locked the entire time. Okay, so this led to a realization. The goal here isn't to keep the voices separate. When you harmonize with yourself, you have a potential of losing the individuality because the blend is so clean. But in this case, the goal here isn't to keep the voices separate. It's the opposite. The goal is to engineer a controlled kind of blur. It really comes off as something really eerie. It feels less like four guys singing and more like one machine talking. Which means when I eventually move into recording this, the priorities shift completely. It's going to be all about precision, uniform vowels, and the tonal differences have to be intentional, not accidental. So, yeah, this is definitely not learn the next part. This is build the system. And that then became my new item that is separate from my Boulevard practice work. In the afternoon, I then moved into the first real test of the secondary block idea. Coming into it, I immediately noticed something different. It was be prepared, and I was no longer working with my morning voice. And after doing Boulevard in the morning and talking through a lot of the day, as I basically transcribed my notes from stream of thought thinking, after that full primary session, my low register had shifted. I mean, I can typically hit B1 and A1 in chest voice. They were there, but they sure weren't easy to get to. And this isn't, I've talked about how those notes are tricky in the confines of the song and how I'm okay outside the song. Even outside of the take, the A1 and the B1 were not easy. But this was a secondary block, so I figured instead of fighting it, just go with it. Whatever comes out, and just go through it. I am never trying to recreate. I'm not trying to turn this into a morning. I'm not trying to follow up Boulevard. Every one of my takes is its own entity that hopefully has grown from experience, but is not necessarily chasing experience. The whole idea was to stay connected and stable inside the voice that I had at that point. So I started with take 156. And I will admit, Be Prepared has come along a lot further than Boulevard, but I also started it first. That 156 reflected almost perfectly. Before playback, it felt good overall. I could tell that I'd actually pulled off a couple of the A1s. The final two didn't really form, and that's been a consistent problem. But I didn't push for anything. I just let it be what it was. And when I listened back, it was stronger than I expected. The A1s that showed up were clear, audible, and had some real resonance and buzz to them. More importantly, I wasn't chasing them. They just were there. And that energy stayed consistent the whole way through. It sat right where it was supposed to, and especially for a secondary session. Of course, you won't get a sniff out of me. Had that same little bit of edge again from the clipping, which at this point I'm starting to really think might just be part of the character to overdo it just a tiny bit, not too far, because it does give a nice crunchiness to it. Right at the beginning, there were a couple of slightly off notes. But within a line or two, my system had pretty much corrected itself. Everything locked right back in. And I think that's really what makes this session matter. It's not that it was a peak take. It's that it worked exactly the way it was designed to work. A secondary take after a primary, the whole idea is lower capacity, less ideal conditions, shorter time frame to work, and just hope that everything holds under those kinds of conditions. And the secondary block today did its job. It reinforced the stability. It maintained the skill, and it supported the overall structure without trying to compete with the primary work from earlier. And if anything stands out from today, it's that the process is starting to become reliable. Even when the instrument changes from morning to afternoon, the framework adjusts, the work moves around, it still holds. There was one more new addition. I didn't actually work today, but I will be bringing in this week. I am adding in a third piece of music into my mix. Excuse me. The song is called Brighter, and it's from season 2 of Has Been Hotel, an Amazon Prime animated series, not for kids. Quick aside, that show has basically been my family's addiction for about 2 years now, which is also why the t-shirts tend to lean toward Has Been. Anyway, I've been singing it informally pretty much since the song released in season 2. It felt like a natural place to actually expand it with structure, with how it should be sung. And I think I'm at a natural place to expand it now that I can support it with what I'm doing. I don't believe it's going to take me 156 takes to get to where Be Prepared is. There was one more thing I noticed by the end of the day, which made me very happy. Despite completely mixing up my day, I managed to hit F4s in the morning and A1s in the afternoon without putting in the effort to get them. They were just there, and I think that might be the clearest sign of what's really starting to change. Now, usually about this time, I always ask the same question. What do I think today, to me, was really about? This morning showed me that if the structure can support the work can move forward without fighting itself. The read between session, and I hadn't called it that yet. Boulevard read between, because the next session begins read between the lines. The read between session showed me that expansion isn't just add more. Sometimes it means building something entirely new to support what's coming next. And as I dive more into that specific project, I'll talk more about what's needed around the singing. The afternoon confirmed something really important, and that is that the system doesn't just work when I've got it positioned at an ideal time. Everything's working when it shifts, when the voice changes, when the conditions aren't perfect. And if I had to sum this up, the whole day, progress is starting to feel less like something I go after and more like something that I built up allows to happen. And I think that's a great way to start my second month of journaling this. I'm really quite happy with how things have developed. As always, thanks for being a part of my journey. I'm going to wrap things up for day 32. Obviously, barring some surprise, I will be back tomorrow for day 33. And as always, later.